Thank you very much, Mr. Benton, and can I say what an honour it is to serve under your chairmanship, not for the first time. Could I start by declaring a bit of an interest? My enthusiasm for this particular subject started when I was part of the creation of a charity, the Countryside Alliance Foundation, in previous years, and that fueled the fire as far as this particular topic is concerned. But since that time, there have been a number of organisations which have come onto my radar who've helped enormously in shaping my views. And if I could just quickly list them, the Field Studies Council, and particularly their excellent staff at West Orielton in Pembrokeshire in my constituency, the National Trust and their Outdoor Britain campaign, and particularly the help of Jonathan Hughes, the English Outdoor Council, the Bushcraft Company, the RSPB, and the Council for Learning Outside the Classroom. One of the encouraging things about preparing for this debate was the common ground that we found between so many different organisations. What I'd also like to stress is this is not a debate about urban versus rural interests. This is something which is important to everybody, wherever they come from, whatever their background, whatever their aspirations. And nor is it, Mr. Benton, a debate about persuading urban children to go out and do things like skin rabbits. It's not about that. This is about getting everybody out of a classroom and into a new environment, whether it's teachers, whether it's pupils, and finding something somewhere that they are good at and which they can excel in and which can excite them. And it is, in short, about outdoor education. It is not about outdoor entertainment. And in order to put some background context into this, what struck me when I looked into the topic was that these days only about 10% of children play outdoors at all, whereas about 40% of their parents used to. And there was a survey conducted a few years ago by Country Life magazine, which illustrated the challenge that confronts us. They asked a group of children why it was important in their view that the gates were closed when out in the countryside, to which the most popular answer was to keep the elephants in, and why it was also perhaps a more enjoyable place to live in rural areas than urban ones, to which the equally depressing but slightly telling response was there are fewer coppers. These are the challenges, these are the facts which underlie and underpin part of the debate. It's not all of it, as I've stressed earlier on, but we have a big mountain to climb, but the consensus is there, and I think the enthusiasm is there to climb it. There is also, Mr. Benton, emerging evidence to suggest that outdoor learning meets every social target that we set. It's good for education, good for health, good for behaviour, good for community cohesion, and good, of course, for the natural environment. Everybody who takes part, not just people who may be from a disadvantaged background, who may or may not excel in normal traditional classroom size, everybody benefits from this particular process. It teaches people in particular teachers to also understand risk. Depressingly, 76% of teachers turn down the opportunity to go on field trips because of health and safety fears. Yet it is low risk and high reward, and the statistics back that up. Only 364 legal claims have been tabled in relation to children injured at school in a 10-year period. Only half of those ended up in any kind of a payment, which meant most local authorities paid out, on average, £293 over that period of time.
My honourable friend give way?
I will indeed.
I thank the honourable friend for giving way and congratulate him on securing this important debate on a topic that I know is very dear to his heart. Does he agree with me that the health and safety culture that we now have in this country is actually hugely damaging, not just in respect to the topic of this debate, but overall, and that a bit of common sense and some good, sensible reforms to encourage people to take reasonable risks when dealing with children or any other matter would be a great benefit to our education system and to the people of this country?
My honourable friend makes a good comment, and of course the difficulty we've got into in the context of health and safety is we are trying to create a society, I suspect, where risk is eliminated. No such thing is possible. A risk, of course, can be limited and it can be managed, but it cannot be eliminated. And the honourable gentleman highlights that point. Well, if I can proceed and come back to my honourable friend in one moment. 53% of 6 to 15-year-olds did not go on a single school trip in 2008, the last decent set of figures we have. And a further rather depressing thought is that in the last 10 years, there has been only £4.5 million of funding for this particular concept. And that is in stark contrast to perhaps, I can use the example of Music Manifesto, which attracted £332 million of funding in 2007 alone. 97% of teachers believe it is important for children to learn about the countryside within the national curriculum. 85% of children, young children and their parents agree. And what about the teachers themselves? Some teachers, and this is perhaps gets to the heart of the debate, simply cannot do what they want to do because their school or their particular local authority will not fund them or will not fund their cover. It's called the rarely covers conundrum when they're actually taking children on their particular trip. And also, currently under the Qualified Teacher Status 30, trainee teachers are asked only to recognise opportunities for out-of-classroom learning. This is a weak standard, but even this is not being reached by some initial teacher training providers. Give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful for the honourable member giving way. I wonder if he agrees with me that one of the barriers to teachers having the confidence to take those kids out of school and into a countryside area and pursue an education about rural life is that they don't have access to resources and to knowledge. And I wonder if the honourable member is aware of a charity called FACE, Farming and Countryside Education, that are based at Stoneleigh in Warwickshire, who actually offer teachers resources and knowledge and teaching aids to help them form education lessons to actually partake in rural education.
Thank the honourable member for his intervention. I am aware of the charity and the good work that it does. I'm also aware of countless other charities which are offering similar, if not identical, services. Having stated earlier on that this was not a debate about town versus country, and it isn't, I think we need to be careful not to fall into the trap which I've set myself of looking at this as the only benefit of this being teaching urban children about rural ways. It's not about that. But this and your intervention, the honourable member's intervention, does make it clear that there are plenty of people out there who are enthusiastic about reaping the benefits of this particular concept, but can't do so either because there is insufficient funding through the charitable sector or because there are health and safety or bureaucratic or central government funding obstacles in the way. But there are two questions, if I can put to the Minister in the light of what we've heard so far. Firstly, whether she would consider reviewing whether current teacher training is providing new teachers with the skills to lead outdoor learning activities in the first place, and also whether she will review the rarely covered guides and residential visits and fieldwork, and whether part of the pupil premium may be used for that particular purpose. If I may, Mr. Benton, move on to the health benefits, which I touched on earlier on. There is emerging evidence of direct and indirect benefits, including personal well-being and the latest catchphrase, happiness. The current gaming epidemic does not lend itself to our mission of stirring a child's interest in the outside world. There was a staggering 53 computer games released onto the market in April 2010 alone. And it is easy to deduce that we cannot leave it to the children themselves to discover the outside world. It is our responsibility to take them there. Activities such as walking, cycling, riding can burn up to 380 calories an hour. Green spaces can stabilise anger in young people, which can also help prevent antisocial behaviour. And outdoor education could therefore play a key role in reducing the amount of permanent and fixed exclusions for physical and verbal abuse in schools, which is currently running at the eye-watering figure of 300,000 per year. And of course, it could also help reduce the cost of youth crime and obesity, which is an even more staggering and depressing £5 billion per annum, which the taxpayer is currently expected to pick up. Mr. Benton, I want to turn to the evidence, and of course, that is an essential prerequisite of any progress that we make on this particular topic. And perhaps I could start with what Ofsted have to say about the subject. They published in 2008 a thematic report which stated, when planned and implemented well, learning outside the classroom contributed significantly to raising standards and improving pupils' personal, social and emotional development. And they went on and recommended that we should ensure that their curriculum planning includes sufficient, well-structured opportunities for all learners to engage in learning outside the classroom as a key integrated element of their experience, and to ensure equal and full access for all learners to learning outside the classroom. that was what Ofsted said. This is what the National Trust said in a similar study, but dated 2006. We looked at whether school children's learning about their local environment would influence the way they treated. We found that not only was this the case, but high-quality, out-of-classroom learning also influenced how children behave and the lifestyle choices that they make. It shows the potential for school trips not just to change individual lives, but the lives of whole communities. And if that wasn't enough, Mr. Benton, of course.
Thank the honourable member for giving way, and I would too congratulate him on the timeliness of his debate. Would he agree with me that in addition to the issues that he's now outlining from those surveys, that the battle against childhood obesity can also be taken further by the issue of learning outside the classroom, and can contribute to that battle, which unfortunately as a society we don't seem to be taking seriously?
The Honourable Gentleman makes a very good point, and I think there are direct and indirect health benefits to be gained from this particular educational concept. I think the direct benefits are simply getting people out of a windowless and joyless classroom environment into something into an area, an environment which is more interesting, more demanding physically, is a good thing. But also, as part of that outdoor education, can teach people about the value of a varied and different diet, the process of food production, the attractions of exercise and entertainment in whatever form it might come in open areas. Then, of course, it's going to have a positive effect. And that used to be just conjecture, I think, on our part and on the part of the experts. There is now evidence to support that that is actually the case. And this is, I think, the encouraging thing. We are moving now to an area where we're going beyond just speculating to an area where we can genuinely point the finger at evidence which supports your particular point. Mr. Benton, the Children's Schools and Families Select Committee also came up trumps, if you like, as far as this particular project is concerned, and they stated learning outside the classroom is important and the department must provide adequate funding to achieve maximum impact. There should be an individual entitlement within the national curriculum to at least one out-of-school visit a term. And if I may pose perhaps two more questions for the Minister on the back of those third-party endorsements, it would be these. Will the government reconsider plans to include an entitlement for outdoor learning for everybody within the curriculum? And can outdoor learning be included as part of the Ofsted inspection protocol? Because there is a feeling, I think, amongst the teaching profession who I have any contact with, is if it is not inspected, it is not important. It is clearly important. Ofsted has said it is important. The Select Committee has said it is important. So if it is important, let's put it in the inspection protocol so that everybody knows that it's important and we can cement it into the minds of those responsible for outdoor learning project. And of course, if I may, representing a seat in West Wales, just turn for a brief moment to how the Welsh Assembly Government looks at this particular issue. And it's, I think, encouraging that they are perhaps a few lengths ahead of us here in Westminster on this particular topic. I recognise that it's devolved, but I think we can learn lessons from the Welsh Assembly in this particular regard. Their foundation phase is the Welsh Assembly Government's approach to learning for children for 3 to 7 years, and my own particular children have benefited from initiatives such as Forest School, a regular, perfectly non-contentious monthly trip into the great outdoors of Wales, which benefits children from quite a young age in so many different ways. And the Welsh Assembly recognises it. And their framework states, the foundation phase environment should promote discovery and independence and a greater emphasis on using the outdoor environment as a resource for children's learning. And they go on to add, provide opportunities for children to experience the outdoor learning environment, to become active learners through the play-based foundation phase curriculum. And I would say to the Minister, if it's good enough for the Welsh Assembly, then surely it's good enough for the UK as a whole. And to conclude my, I hope, short contribution on this important topic, I wanted to just make these final points. We can prove now that outdoor education improves health, improves education, improves social benefits for children, for young people, and for society as a whole. We can prove increasingly that if we can obtain these benefits for young children and indeed for young adults, then the economic benefits for the taxpayer in the long term could also be huge and well worth the investment which is required now. And I wanted to finish with two case studies. There was a project I was involved with in my last job called Fishing for Schools, where we took people with often very severe disadvantages and just put them in an environment that they weren't used to. And we used to marvel at the way in which lives could be transformed as a consequence of this very simple project. We had one pupil called Zach on that particular programme, and his teacher wrote to us after the course had finished and said this: Zach had been suffering from bullying and was often in trouble with regards to behaviour in school. But since the course, he has worked hard, been positive, behaves well, and is a more mature and sensible young man. Wow, what a difference. And Alex McBarnett, founder of the Bushcraft Company. Here's a guy who came into this world as a result of difficulties that he had in traditional education, and using his own get-up-and-go spirit, his own sort of inspirational zeal, started his own company. And he said children who struggle a bit more in the classroom have an opportunity here to shine, and you can actually watch their self-esteem grow by the day, which is fabulous. Mr. Benton, I will indeed.
For giving way. Would the member agree that perhaps maybe there are many outside bodies that can contribute to outdoor learning? One of those would be country sports, which I know that you perhaps might have an interest in. I'm just wondering, do you see a role perhaps for them, whether through BASC or through Countryside Alliance, that could help to benefit young people?
Honourable Member makes a point which he knows that I will approve of, and I had been rather deliberately not making it for exactly that reason. I actually think that any way in which we can take young people into interesting, challenging, different, adventurous environments, teach them skills that they don't have, introduce them to ways of life and people and communities that they may not have any contact with, the more of that we can do, the better. And I don't just say that as somebody who has had a personal and professional interest and to some extent still does. I say that because I've seen so many examples of people who have benefited from that. And this is not just to say rural people or urban people or suburban people. It's not just people from poor backgrounds or rich backgrounds. Everybody who has had the fantastic privilege of coming into contact with the outside world, whether it's formally or informally, has come away feeling that they have gained something which traditional education could not provide them. So if we all have, I think, a social responsibility to encourage youth in that respect, but we need help from central government, I think, to break down the barriers that sometimes prevent us from being able to do that. And I suppose that leads nicely to my final question to the Minister, which is, this is undoubtedly an area which I think, and other members think, and organisations out there in the real world think, could bring positive benefits to the nation, positive benefits to people who sometimes struggle to obtain positive benefits from the type of education system that we have, through no fault of their own and often through no fault of their local authority or no fault of the government. We have a golden opportunity now to do two things, which is to improve the lives of a number of people in a number of communities through a few simple initiatives, which, yes, of course, does require funding. It doesn't require obscene levels of funding, but the investment, it's not funding, it's an investment, because the downstream economic consequences of doing this will be profoundly beneficial to the nation, will save us millions of pounds in the long term if we get it right. And I would hope very much, as a final request, that the Minister may grant us an audience with perhaps herself and the Secretary of State, not only for members of this House who may be interested, but also the wide range of outside bodies who've contributed to this debate, who've made some really positive strides in the right direction. If we could get together early in the new year to see if we could convert what at the moment is a struggling dream into a deliverable reality, then this debate would have been a worthwhile use of our Wednesday morning.
Andrew Percy.
Thank you, Mr Benton, for allowing me to contribute to this debate. I congratulate my honourable friend for securing this debate on this hugely important matter, and it's quite timely actually, because it was only about 3 weeks ago I was on Goole Moor in my own constituency meeting with Natural England to highlight the potential opportunities for that nationally important nature reserve with our local schools, and following that I've been working with our fantastic head teacher at Goole High School to try to find innovative ways of using the moor and that site for educational purposes and health purposes. I just make one small appeal to the Minister as a former school teacher in terms of adding anything else into the Ofsted framework. If something goes into the Ofsted framework, can we at least have a 1 in, 1 out, and preferably a 1 in, 2 out? Because there are huge amounts of pressures already on school teachers through the inspection regime. And actually, it's natural, really, because of the way the profession is now structured, that we tend to teach towards Ofsted rather than sometimes towards the young people we're there to enhance. So I just make that small appeal to the Minister. I also congratulate my honourable friend for his knowledge of the teacher training processes, because it is true to say that although part of your PGCE requires you to undertake a trip and to prove you can organise a trip, that's normally to a museum, it's normally very well structured, so you don't really come away from that training with particular skills in organising trips outside. And actually, there are so many pressures on teachers in terms of advice, risk assessments and all the rest of it, that it can be incredibly difficult to organise trips outside of the classroom. But I certainly will do, yes.
Thank you for giving way on this point. One other point is the actual potential cost, or the actual cost of insurance for minibus driving for teachers, and if there was something that could be done on this, make a considerable difference, because I know often that's over £1,000, and that proves to be a particular barrier for doing short trips to local open spaces.
That's absolutely, thank you, and that's absolutely key to this, because there are huge costs and other pressures, and including extra staffing. I mean, I remember when I was doing my final teaching practice at Endeavour High School in Hull, I was training as a history teacher. We were doing the Industrial Revolution, and the area I taught in actually had all this fantastic resource outside of Industrial Revolution age buildings, and I simply wanted to take my class of Year 8s outside to look at some of these buildings, but was told, of course, that to do that I'd have to do a risk assessment. I would have to get 3 members of staff because there were 30 kids in the class, and the ratio has to be 1 to 10. And of course, by the end of the day, these kids are running off home across these same streets, past these same buildings. So in the end, we never actually did that, and ended up sitting in the classroom looking at pictures instead. So there's a great deal of the whilst the teaching profession can certainly do more in enhancing outside learning, we do need to have the structures in place to support us, and some of those pressures removed somewhat. And of course, my union, or my previous union, actually advised us, following some of the sensationalised reports in the press about school trips, not to undertake school trips, which of course is a reaction again to all this bureaucracy. I think there is a particular role for outdoor education for excluded children and for children with special needs. I never, as any teacher has to, who work with children of a particular across the spectrum, but it was often those children who were the most challenging, who actually benefited the most from being taken outside of the formal school setting, where they were still learning. And it's something I made reference to in my maiden speech, of course. This is expensive to deliver education outside of the classroom, but I think for those children, the value cannot really be quantified. I've seen how kids have gone off on particular courses outside the classroom and come back significantly changed. So I do think there is a particular role here, and I hope that as the Minister is about to undertake a review, I believe, into special and additional needs, that's something that perhaps can be taken into account. I also think there is, with a change in curriculum, and this government has quite rightly outlined how we intend to move to more vocational pathways for children, or joint pathways. I think actually there are huge benefits and opportunities there to actually not just do visits outside of the school, but to get skills outside of the school. One of the things I was talking to Natural England about was the potential on this nationally important nature reserve, I'll plug it once again, was actually whether or not we could look at putting some kind of curriculum together around countryside management, which kids could access from our local schools. So I think there are not just health benefits, which my honourable friend quite rightly highlighted. There are also educational benefits here in this skills.
I'm very grateful for the honourable member giving way. I wonder if he's aware that at this moment in time and previously there has been funding through DEFRA for the higher level entry scheme, where you can have educational visits from schools onto farms. But my understanding is that that scheme is now closed to new entrants. And I wonder if I could take the opportunity to encourage the Minister to put pressure on DEFRA to clarify whether that scheme is now closed to new entrants or whether it's still open for people to apply.
Well, I'm happy to be a conduit, Mr Benton, for my honourable friend's point, and I'm sure through me the Minister has heard what he said and will respond as appropriately as possible. I just want to close by again congratulating my honourable friend for securing this debate. I do think this is a hugely important area for debate, and it's pleasing to see so many colleagues from all sides have attended this debate, particularly my honourable friends. It's hugely important, and I look forward to the Minister's response, and I thank you for allowing me, Mr Benton, to make a small contribution to the debate.
Alan Kearns.
Thank you, Mr Benton. It's a privilege to contribute under your chairmanship, and I want to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire, for securing the debate and for the excellent contribution that he made in terms of advancing this subject. Within my honourable friend's initial contribution, he touched on the foundation phase and the different approach that is taken in Wales in this respect. And that is the area that I want to spend a little bit of time on in terms of talking of my experience, because I should declare an interest in that my son was one of the first children to go through the foundation phase in Wales under the new education structure for Key Stage 1, and the impact and the influences that's had on his benefit, but also to the wider community in Wales and the impact it's had on the education and some of the issues that have come out from that. I think by way of background, it's worth underlining that the Key Stage 1, or the foundation phase as we refer to it, has a requirement that 50% of teaching time is spent outside of the classroom. Now, my honourable friend referred, as did many other honourable friends, referred to specific visits, be it museums, be it to farms, be it to any extracurricular activities from outside of the classroom, I think, which is important. But the whole point of the foundation phase is to mainstream outdoor learning as part of the educational structure. And that will have thrown out lots of problems and issues that needed resolving, which I'll come on to in a moment. But I do think it's important to underline the significant benefits that children have drawn from the new approach to learning. Social skills and the way in which children interact with each other, their individual approach to risk management and personal management of the child, the innovation that it's allowed them to explore and to express, the way it's helping. It's still early to assess as to whether the contribution of that to activity amongst and the challenges against obesity has already been mentioned, but it's also about a lifestyle and leadership that allows children to develop and allows the teacher to develop themselves. So those are some of the benefits that is brought to the children, particularly in an environment where computer gaming seems so obvious, where parents are naturally worried about children playing outside in the way that in a different way to the times when we probably were growing up. But as well as the children, quite obviously, the teachers have been allowed to benefit as well. I mean, that's claustrophobia sometimes that I'm told some teachers feel because they're maintained within the classroom no matter what the weather is, and they're stuck there, particularly on wet days when the children aren't even free to go outside during the break times. It's allowed the teachers to innovate, it's allowed them to try new approaches, to use the environment around them. And it's important to express that this isn't only in schools that in a rural location, it's also within schools within an urban environment where they really have been able to adapt the learning practice, the curriculum, to respond to the environment, and the children and teachers have been able to react in a first-class way to those demands. I should also add that there have been benefits as well to parents, to schools, to governors in general, because under the requirement where 50% of the teaching time must be spent or should be spent outside of the classroom, that has enabled more people to access some of the schools in higher demand. because current guidance limits the amount of pupils to the classroom. And I'm familiar with a number of appeals, admission appeals, and I should declare an interest that my wife's an education lawyer, and she has used this as an argument in representing some children who wanted to gain access to the schools, but the guidance that falls from the National Assembly for Wales to teachers in terms of is directly related to the floor space that's available and the number of children that can go there. But if half of the time is spent outside of the classroom, that really does highlight that that guidance is out of date and needs to be changed, because quite obviously half of the classroom, it can be argued, is outside, and that has been accepted in some admission appeals cases. As I suggested earlier, it has thrown out some issues and some problems that still haven't been fully resolved. There was a significant need for capital spend. We needed to make the classrooms more accessible to outdoors. There was also a need for investment in wet weather gear. Now, it might come as something of a surprise to you, but it isn't always sunny in Wales. And quite obviously, if we are to achieve the 50% target, then investment in effective, proper wet weather gear was essential. And it's regrettable to draw the House's attention that in some schools, it was the Parent Teachers Association that raised the money in order to deliver that wet weather gear. Well, when we talked about the different sorts of communities, be it those rural, be it those prosperous or more deprived communities, then quite obviously it is essential that the same sorts of wet weather equipment is made available to everyone. It's also raised challenges and raised questions in relation to teachers' training. And my honourable friend, the member for Brighton Goole, highlighted that, as did my honourable friend from Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire, in the need for teachers' training to reflect the modern demands of parents and pupils. And I want to close with one final question in terms of how is this culture taken forward to Key Stage 2 and beyond, because without question it's become central to the mode of learning in Key Stage. I will give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to the honourable for allowing me to intervene. I'm learning something today, and that is the difference between Welsh and English education for youngsters, because it seems to me many things which would be decided in the school, or indeed at least in the county council, are decided in Wales at national level. Is not mine a more, not mine, but isn't that of English more sensible? What decisions making at local level?
My honourable friend makes a very good point. I think it's fair to say that the education structures in Wales are far more centralised than they are in England. And of course, it's up to the devolved administrations to decide how best to deliver that education. And some of the freedoms that are now to be applied and offered to schools in England won't be offered to schools in Wales. Personally, I think that's regrettable. But the point of my highlighting the merits and benefits of the foundation phase in Key Stage 1 is that has allowed teachers and pupils to express themselves and to learn in different ways. Now, I would encourage the free schools that will become more obvious in number in England to certainly learn from the benefits and merits that the different approach has taken in England. I certainly will give way.
Kevin Brennan.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for giving way, but does he seriously think that a 50% learning outside the classroom aspiration could be met without that direction in the curriculum from the government?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his contribution and his question, but I think it is possible, because with free schools in England, where greater power is devolved to the head teachers and to the governors, then they can decide how best to approach that. And it may well be that rigid 50% approach that's taken in Wales isn't the right approach for their school, depending on their environment, depending on the location, and depending on the needs of the children, because they can better reflect them. But the point I'm making in highlighting the merits and benefits of the approach in Wales, different to that in England, is that it has brought outdoor learning to be central to the theme of education at Key Stage 1. Now, there are significant advantages in that respect, and I would hope that the free schools in England would look at that and apply it to the needs of their pupils. My honourable friend, the member for Brigg and Goole, reflected on the needs of children with special educational needs and how outdoor learning can better reflect that. Well, surely it would depend on the nature of children with special educational needs in an individual school, of how they want to approach their outdoor learning in that respect. And I think that Wales has got a model, albeit centralised, that I would disapprove of, but the thrust of the outdoor learning at Key Stage 1 is a beneficial approach overall. Should the teachers and governors be given that freedom under the system in England, then they could adapt that scheme much more beneficial to the needs of their children. So, in closing, Mr. Benton, I want to underline the need to advance the approach that's taken in Key Stage 1 and the benefits of that, and also there will be some drawbacks that we need to learn about, and how that should be approached through Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3. Being that it's central to education in Key Stage 1, it would be simply wrong to cut it off at Key Stage 2. There needs to be a transition into the needs of older children, and I take on board the contribution from my honourable friend, from the member for Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire, in the essential need for outdoor learning throughout the whole of education, rather than just in Key Stage 1. Thank you.
Owen Walker.
And I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend for Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire on securing this debate on such an important subject, and my other honourable friends around the room for their contributions. Many children and teachers in my constituency of Worcester and in the county of Worcestershire benefit from outdoor education. And as my honourable friend has made clear, the benefits are very substantial. We don't live in a classroom, and it's vital that education should provide children with the tools and the skills they need for real life. Outdoor education recognises the fact that we live not in the controlled environment of a classroom, but in a living, breathing planet. As we seek to give future generations a better understanding of issues such as climate change and pollution, learning outdoors gives children a greater appreciation of the importance of our natural environment. Crucially, some skills such as teamwork, leadership, and an appreciation of risk are far more effectively developed through outdoor education than they can ever be in a classroom. And coming from an urban constituency, but one that is in a rural county, outdoor education has a further advantage for the children of my city of Worcester. It teaches them to appreciate the wonderful countryside around them, understand better the way in which it works and the opportunities that it offers. For centuries, Worcester has been a county town, and the interaction between city and countryside was automatic. But in the age of supermarkets, television and video games, it isn't always that way. Without outdoor education projects, there are many children in my constituency living within a mile or two of wonderful woods and fields who would quite literally never visit them. The lure of the Wii Fit and X Factor are a powerful draw away from the benefits of the outdoors, and parents, themselves working flat out to support their families, aren't always able to take their children out into the countryside as much as they'd like. Fortunately, Worcestershire long ago realised the benefits of outdoor education and was an early adopter of the Forest School scheme enjoyed by many of our primary schools. And having talked to both pupils and teachers at schools from Cherry Orchard and Perry Wood to Dines Green, Gorse Hill Primary and Lippard Grange, I've heard countless stories of the enjoyment and benefit that is brought by this scheme. More important than the stories, though, is the experience itself. And in the case of outdoor learning, seeing really is believing. Seeing the excitement of children when taken out of their classroom and into a natural environment for the first time, you can see how outdoor learning helps to engage some of the most difficult and easily distracted pupils. Seeing the way in which children learn new respect for their teachers when they can show them physical skills, and how teachers relish the opportunity to escape the confines of the classroom, you can immediately understand why having forest school status is an important tool for retention at many local primaries. But outdoor learning isn't and should not be restricted to the primary sector. At Tudor Grange Academy in the heart of Warndon, outdoor learning is being developed as a key tool and a key opportunity for engaging students. This new academy serves a large population that will benefit from the pupil premium, and replace the school that struggled for many years to engage its students and deal with truancy, apathy and high levels of special needs.
Would the honourable member agree as well that in today's society of young people, whether it be primary school or secondary school children, that they have a great awareness of the environment, of climate change, of litter control, of recycling and all of those things? Would he agree with me, as I think he's probably trying to put forward in his statement here today, that more needs to be done and it needs to be a continuation of what's already in place?
Absolutely. I completely agree with that point. And I think through outdoor learning, we can actually give people more of an opportunity to understand these things even better. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's a very positive benefit. But coming back to the example of Tudor Grange in my constituency, through outdoor learning, the new and energetic leadership of the Academy has found a way to engage some of the most difficult pupils and provide a pathway to work for some of those who are simply uninterested in an academic education. By taking pupils out of the classroom for part of their day and engaging them in working and learning outdoors, they found that behaviour is much improved on their return to the classroom. Pupils who would previously disrupt academic classes are prepared to get down to work in maths and English much better, having spent part of the day outside. A local employer, Cobhouse Fisheries, has given the Academy access to their resources, and this environment is used for forestry, animal husbandry, angling and orienteering. It forms part of a Year 12 Access to Work programme, but also provides an environment for engaging 30 at-risk students who have a bespoke curriculum, utilising outdoor education as their key hook. The Academy works closely with a local farm, and a group of very vulnerable students have achieved their BTEC certificate in agriculture there within 1 year. They're now doing a BTEC Countryside and Environment course as part of their programme, and these students are making significant progress in their literacy and numeracy from a very low baseline. They weren't engaging with a mainstream curriculum before this, but two students on this route hadn't attended school for 2 years prior to the Academy opening these courses. They're now in Year 11 and on track to achieve the equivalent of 6 GCSEs minimum, with improved attendance and better results across the board. Outdoor learning at Tudor Grange extends to a cadet force branch and a course in public services, which is proving particularly popular in the Academy with students who presented with extreme behavioural difficulties. The course includes a lot of personal health and fitness units, and local residents are now familiar with the sight of groups from the Academy running in units around Worcester as part of their training drills. The principal tells me this is developing tenacity and determination in students we would never have attached such attributes to before. But speaking of the benefits of outdoor learning in Worcestershire, it would be remiss of me not to mention some of the wonderful work that goes on beyond the boundaries of my constituency. My honourable friends for Mid Worcestershire and West Worcestershire would no doubt speak passionately about the excellent schools in their own constituencies that provide fantastic opportunities for outdoor learning. However, they are kept away from this debate by ministerial and select committee responsibilities, respectively. And I'd like to just give a couple of examples where the positive influence of schools in their patches has been felt as far afield as my own constituency. Top Barn Farm, just beyond my boundaries, is a hugely inspiring centre for outdoor learning and a test base for the care farming movement. Now, honourable members will be aware of the care farming movement. Some may feel it's beyond the scope of this debate, but I actually think the work that's being done there to bring particularly special needs children onto the farming environment and make sure that they can benefit from learning opportunities there deserves a mention. Another institution which I recently visited and which hugely impressed me was the Madresfield Early Years Centre in West Worcestershire. This wonderful school, at which I know the Honourable Member for West Worcestershire was on Friday, is a product of a vision for outdoor learning and the boundless energy of its founder, Alice Bennett, a farmer's wife who devoted her life to bringing outdoor learning into a farming environment. It brings children quite literally onto the farm as their learning environment and caters for a broad cross-section of society, from those receiving state support and living in social housing to the children of the grandest houses in the area. Each child has at least 2 half-days a week out of doors, and children are encouraged to engage with the environment, take constant exercise and relish the opportunities offered by the countryside. It is perhaps with the words of that very inspiring head teacher that I can conclude my comments. She recently returned from a visit to Denmark, where she was looking at how they integrate outdoor learning into their system. She concluded, outdoor education should be a human right. Its benefits in motivation and engagement, teaching cooperation and leadership, fitness gain and better attitude are beyond question. She also spoke of the miracles that happen outside with special needs children. I hope that the Minister will carefully consider the miraculous benefits of outdoor learning for her forthcoming Green Paper on special needs education.
Mark Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this morning, and can I pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire for securing this very important debate. And perhaps I should declare an interest like the Honourable Member for Brigham Gould. I used to be a teacher. I was a teacher for 12 years and still a member of my union, the NAS UWT. The first thing I want to say is I very much endorse what I think everybody said, that this is not simply a debate about rural areas. My honourable friend has a proud record on championing rural areas, many of which I concur with, but he was right to draw an important point, namely that this is about urban schools as well. Just a couple of anecdotes to start with. One of the most successful field trips I ever organised was leading a group of children from a deprived school in North Devon down to the city of Plymouth. An excellent day's work on examining the architecture, the effects of the Blitz, the new buildings that came up in Plymouth, Naval Town, looking at the economy of that area. Now, those children wouldn't have experienced that. It's a long way from Barnstable in North Devon down to Plymouth. They would never have experienced that had not we given the opportunity. Closer home, I think of the scheme we embarked on in Powys, whereby we set up a partnership scheme between a local organic farm and our school. We acquired a plot of land. We visited each term. Every child in that school, a small village school, visited that farm every year, nurtured that plot, grew the vegetables, took the vegetables back to school to make meals.
Give way.
Indeed.
I think my own friend makes a very good point on the need for farmers to play a role in outdoor learning. What worries me is the fact that so many school children don't actually understand where their food comes from. And I think that's a quite frightening element, especially when you talk to some school children and you ask them where do their potatoes or chips come from, and they'll say McDonald's. Does he think that the NFU and farmers need to play a key role in this education and getting a better understanding of where our food actually comes from?
Absolutely, and I think one of the benefits of the project that I was involved in, we looked at the seasonality of fruit and vegetables, and I think the assumption is made that just because you live and work in a rural area, children live in a rural area, that they are automatically going to have access to farms and the kind of schemes that the NFU and others, the Farmers Union of Wales in our country, have put forward. And that assumption we can't make, so that's why I think this debate is important, and getting some clear guidelines. This is looking a bit like a Welsh debate, so I won't stray into devolved matters too much. I'm very proud about that. I think also of the project we undertook every year. We took the year 5-6 children to an outdoor pursuit centre in Montgomeryshire, Staittle Outdoor Pursuit Centre, kayaking, orienteering, rock climbing, mountain walks or canoeing. The very kind of activities, again, that many special needs children, people that weren't high achievers in the classroom, really gained from. When we were talking teaching concepts of teamwork and collaborative work and team building, and really important opportunities for those children. Indeed.
The point you make about the outdoor pursuit centre is an important one, because the Honourable Member for Brake and Gould made the point that health and safety was an issue in terms of taking children out of the classroom. And I think these outdoor pursuit centres, they do have the health and safety covered. They do have the skills to deal with pupils in a safe manner and to give them the experiences that you point out.
I have to say, absolutely, I agree with the Honourable Gentleman very much on that point. And one of the nice things as a teacher organising trips was that you yourself didn't have to get embroiled in the bureaucracy of organising risk assessments, because it had already been done by trained professionals. It's a core debate. This isn't a peripheral thing. It isn't a trendy lefty debate about the effectiveness of group work or topic work, the debates we've had in the past. It's about enhancing learning in the classroom, teaching in context, teaching in the real world, broadening horizons in the most strong way. And I reflect back on my own education. The only opportunity I had in secondary school, very little in primary school, was the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme, which is a great scheme. Great opportunities for young people, but very much curtailed and limited. Now, looking back over the 3 schools I taught in, was there always a dedicated member of staff with expertise responsible for developing the outdoor curriculum? If there was, in some of those instances, it wasn't very visible. Should we be giving more prominence for outdoor education in initial teacher training? And I agree, I studied a PGC course. Again, the limitations of that course, great, I benefited from it, I gained it, I enjoyed my 12 years in the classroom, but the limitations were there in terms of outdoor education. So it's a repeat of the question to my honourable friend the Minister, is the initial teacher training that we are providing giving teachers the skills they need to lead outdoor learning? It's all well talking about identifying opportunities. Teachers sit there developing their lesson plans, identifying opportunities, but it's whether those opportunities for outdoor learning can be delivered. It's not about burdening the curriculum. And I agree with the direction of travel. It's about scaling down the curriculum. Years ago, I used to work in the other place as a researcher, and in 1988, when the national curriculum was introduced, I can remember the huge number of representations made from different organisations to include subjects in the national curriculum. And it was an overburdening experience. Years later in the classroom, I can remember the minutiae of detail directed from the centre about how I should deliver a numeracy hour and a literacy hour down to the 5 minutes of a plenary session at the end. Now, we're moving away from that, and that, I think, was an overly prescriptive period. But what we are, I think, seeking, and I think there's a consensus so far in everybody that's spoken, is building meaningful cross-curricular links in key areas of the curriculum where outdoor activities are appropriate, notably in geography and history and, of course, science. Now, the Select Committee, as the Honourable Member for Carmarthen West alluded, did produce their report in April 2010. And I just want to draw on 3 of their conclusions. Firstly, it talked about the ability of families to pay or not be able to afford trips, and the deterrent to schools in offering opportunities to pupils. And I can think of one experience in one school I taught where there was always a blanket policy that anything outlandish by way of trips couldn't be counted, because we knew that the parents in that, I would call it a deprived area, certainly some of the deprived wards, would be unable to even subsidise their children's trips. And the Select Committee recognised the principle of subsidies from children for low-income families for school trips, and I think that should be endorsed. It also talked about an individual entitlement within the national curriculum to at least one school visit each term. I think that is integral to the curriculum that needs to be delivered, and I'd like to hear my honourable friend's comments on that individual entitlement to outdoor education.
Turner.
Mr. Bolton, Mr. Benton, could I just draw attention to one other thing? When I was a teacher, for one member of staff to take one class into the town was perfectly acceptable. What has happened since then?
Well, the Honourable Member for the Isle of Wight is right, and the answer came from the Honourable Member for Brigg and Gould when he talked about the 1 to 10 rule. And that's very hard. And also, sometimes I have to say, well, it's very hard sometimes to engage parents to become involved in outdoor pursuits as well. Sometimes parents, we think of this captive audience of parents eager to accompany their children on trips. That isn't always the case. I think fundamentally there is a need for schools to have an explicit policy on learning outside the classroom. And as I said before, it's not just having a policy, not just having the words, sometimes in readiness for the Ofsted or Estin inspections. It's about being able to deliver. Now, I think this government does recognise it's important, as to its credit, the last government recognised the importance of outdoor learning. And it is important for the Council of Learning outside the classroom to get on with the job. But I regret the fact that the Select Committee's recommendations on additional resources and government regulation and monitoring guidance weren't accepted. Now, we were having a little spirited debate about Welsh Assembly government policy, and I don't want regulation and rules to be over-prescriptive, but I do think we need some clear guidelines from the centre. I have to say that most professionals and most schools that I have been involved with fully recognise the importance, as the member for Vale of Glamorgan alluded to, delivering the foundation stage with great effectiveness, and I've got 2 young children experiencing the foundation stage now as well. But that is not always the case across England and elsewhere in the United Kingdom, and I think we do need those rules and that guidance. I'm not going to repeat all the figures that the Honourable Member alluded to in terms of the effectiveness of outdoor education. But I do want to say something about this risk-averse culture that is developing in our country. And the characterisation of many children's lives, which means home to school, back to home again, classroom to the sitting room, or TVs, wherever they are in people's houses. And Lord Young, much maligned Lord Young, I don't agree with everything he says, far from it. However, on health and safety, I think it was important that he did his work, common sense, common safety, and that was a welcome attempt to rebalance the risk-averse culture that we have had in this country, which has very much damaged the traditional culture of school trips, with teachers and schools concerned inevitably about the liability if things go wrong. And I can remember the frustration, the bureaucracy, of trying to organise trips. And it isn't surprising that 76% of teachers identify health and safety risk assessments as the main barrier to delivering outdoor learning. But we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there is clearly a measure, despite the few number but tragic cases where things have gone wrong, there has to be a measure of sensible risk assessment and action where negligent behaviour occurs, but we must do all we can to rebalance the system. And the Prime Minister, in his foreword to Lord Young's report, states, "We need to focus regulations where they're most needed, with a new system that is proportionate, not bureaucratic. It treats adults like adults and reinstates some common trust." And we may disagree, some of us, on what that actually constitutes, but I hope we can all agree with the sentiment. The Department of Education launched its Learning Outside the Classroom manifesto in 2006, and that report highlighted work that has been done on the way the brain works. Reading it, it sent me back to teacher training and some of the lectures and seminars that I participated in. But the research showed that learners can be re-engaged with the world as they experience it, known as authentic learning. And that's particularly important when we look at the sciences. The Fiscal Studies Council has seen a decline in the number of people studying secondary science, visiting their residential centres across the country, with a drop of 18% between 2008 and 2010. We do really need to engage with those people who have got the potential interest, if it can be captured and promoted in a very positive way. And it was a sad reflection that only 47% of 6 to 15-year-olds in this country went on a visit to the countryside with their school in 2008. I'm not going to talk about the foundation stage in Wales, other than to say that it has been a huge success. Now, there is much in the government's agenda that suggests they are keen to encourage this activity. They're keen on volunteering. We've had Lord Young's review. But I hope the Minister will be able to outline what steps are being taken to ensure more outdoor learning can take place at schools and translate support into concrete achievement. And one final, very final point, I just want to commend a scheme in Ceredigion in the Penparcau ward of Aberystwyth. It's called the Young Artisan Scheme. Penparcau is a deprived area. We have deprived wards in rural Wales, as others do across the country. And that scheme has largely worked with low achievers, with people with special needs, taking the craft curriculum, the design and technology curriculum, out of the classroom and taking youngsters, year 5, year 6s, to do work with employers, with local colleges, out of the conventional classroom, so that those young people can see real links with the real world. And that's been going for years. It was a pioneering scheme. And it's meant that ultimately some of those later on 16-year-olds have found decent gainful employment on the back of an outdoors education policy. Thank you.
Before I call on the next speaker, there are two people obviously standing. I propose to start the wind-ups no later than 10:40. Good at that.
Thank you very much, Mr Benson, and I will be brief in order to ensure that every member who wants to contribute to this debate is allowed to do so. May I first of all congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire, for bringing this debate to the House. I think it's been an excellent debate. It's been a very positive debate. And certainly I'd like to express an interest, because my honourable friend, the member for the Vale of Glamorgan, mentioned the fact that he needed to declare an interest because he had one child going through the foundation stage in Wales. Well, I have twin boys and another 3 children going through the educational system in Wales. So I need to declare an interest. But certainly, when you talk about the educational benefits of outdoor activities, I think we in Wales are very fortunate, and I don't want to dominate this debate by referring to Wales again, but obviously, when I was a child, I used to go to the Gobaith Cymru centre in Llangrannog, in the Honourable Member for Ceredigion's constituency. And in the same way, when I was slightly older, I went to the centre at Glanllyn, where I learned to go on a canoe and to go down whitewater rafting and so forth. And the terrible thing is I'm now old enough to see my children getting the same experiences. So I do think that the concept of getting children into the outdoor and enjoying outdoor pursuit is an important one, and I fully subscribe to the comments which have been made by several members already in this debate. But I'd like to focus this debate actually on a slightly different aspect of the importance of outdoor activities to the educational sector, and that's the economic impact that this sort of priority has had in a constituency such as mine. My constituency of Aberconwy includes a large tract of Snowdonia. And it is an area which has had to struggle to create employment and to create economic opportunities. And obviously we have to make the best of the facilities and the environments that we have. So obviously agriculture is important, food production, specialist food producers, they're all very important. But a growing part of the economy in my part of the world has been the outdoor activity sector. Now, the outdoor activity sector is not entirely dependent on the educational customer, but it is an important way in which those companies can actually offer an all-year service and all-year-round employment for young people from my constituency. And I can give you examples, numerous examples, which will challenge the Hansard people here today, of organisations and companies in my part of the world who do benefit from providing services to schools in all parts of the United Kingdom. We have in my constituency Plas y Brenin at Capel Curig, which is renowned as a mountaineering centre. We have the Outdoor Education Centre in Conwy, which brings young people to the Conwy Valley to enjoy water rafting and so forth. We have Treetops at Betws y Coed, which is an excellent facility, which is extremely dependent upon school trips in order to ensure that they can offer employment all year, every day of the week, which is an important contributor to the economy of my constituency. And we have these specialist companies who can actually deal with the health and safety aspects. They can actually offer a safe environment for young people to experience the adventure and the challenges offered by the environment of an area such as mine. And Snowdonia is not just there for the enjoyment of people who can afford to come down on a weekend, who can afford to pay for an expensive hotel or a slightly cheaper bed and breakfast on a weekend. It is a facility, the environment in Snowdonia should be enjoyed by young people. And one of the things that I'm really concerned about is the fact that in my constituency and throughout Snowdonia, in addition to these private sector companies who are offering services, we have a number of centres, such as the Oakland Centre in Capel Garmon. Now, the Oakland Centre in Capel Garmon is owned by the local authority in the Wirral. And obviously it is, an hour and a half down the road from the Wirral to my constituency, and they can bring young people out of a very industrialised area, and they can take them into the beauty of Snowdonia, and they can actually enjoy themselves, they can actually enjoy the challenges of getting involved with outdoor activity. And the contribution that the Oakland Centre makes is also an economic one, because they employ local people to ensure that there's food on the table for the young people when they arrive. And throughout Snowdonia, there are numerous examples now of these centres which are actually in danger of being lost because of the fact that the priorities of local authorities are not possibly emphasising the importance of this contribution to the educational sector. So I am concerned about the future of a centre such as Oaklands and others in Snowdonia, because they are not only important in terms of giving opportunities for young people, but they're also important in terms of giving opportunities in my constituency for local people to stay in a rural area, to work in a rural area, and quite often in highly skilled positions as well. And it needs to be said as well that the opportunities afforded by the outdoor activity sector in my part of the world is actually extremely important in terms of the quality of the type of job that is being created. Because when you take responsibility for a group of young people going out mountaineering or going out on a river, that's not a low-skill position. That's a highly skilled, responsible position. And I have to applaud the local authorities in my part of the world, because we hear a lot about the need for local authorities to work across boundaries. Well, certainly in North West Wales, the Isle of Anglesey County Council, Gwynedd County Council, Conwy County Council have come together to form the North Wales Outdoor Partnership. And the whole concept of the North Wales Outdoor Partnership is to give young people from that part of the world an understanding, first of all, of the enjoyments that can be had from the environment of Snowdonia, but also of the economic opportunities that exist. Because what the Outdoor Partnership does is it takes young people out to enjoy mountaineering or kayaking and so forth, but it also highlights the economic opportunities that can be developed from becoming skilled in that area. And there are numerous examples of young people who have gained employment as a result of the skills gained through the North Wales Outdoor Partnership. And I'll finish on this point. In addition, Menter Iaith Conwy is a local company which have also highlighted the need to train young people to actually take responsibility for taking people out onto the mountains. And the fantastic thing about the Menter Iaith Conwy is that they're doing that and training people to do the work through the medium of Welsh or English. And again, it highlights the fact that there are economic opportunities available through outdoor education. So I just want to finish then by saying I don't believe that government spending is necessarily the way forward for every part of the economy. But I think on this particular issue, These organisations, these companies, these employment opportunities, they could be developed within the private sector, but there's no doubt in my view that to make them a year-round proper employment, the educational market is important, and it is important that when these decisions are made, we do take into account the economic impact that this type of activity has on a rural economy such as mine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Justin Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr Benton. I've raised to fully support this excellent debate brought by my honourable friend for Carmarthen West and Pembrokeshire. And I'm just going to raise a couple of points of why I'm so supportive, and then I'll have a plea to the Minister, which I hope will be helpful. First of all, in terms of engagement, many of my honourable friends have talked about the significance of engagement. And in my constituency, I visited a school called Crowdy's Hill, an excellent school for children with autism and ASD. And they're actually fortunate enough to have a small livestock holding on site. And to see the sheer joy and engagement of the children as they sort of had a hands-on involvement with nature firsthand was absolutely fantastic. And one of the things that concerns me is that a number of schools have, whilst they don't have livestock holdings, they often have some forms of nature reserves or things like that. A lot of the new modern PFI schools simply do not have space. And that's a real challenge as we look forward to the next wave of new schools being built. In my constituency, I've also got the National Trust headquarters. And one of the things they say in contributing towards supporting this debate is generation by generation, we are spending less and less time with nature and reducing our capacity to understand, respect and conserve the natural environment. And I know, having spoken on similar subjects before and as a former councillor of 10 years, that individual houses, back gardens in new builds are a third of the size that they were in the 1960s. So where parents are concerned about letting their children venture too far away, they can't even actually do it very easily on their own doorsteps. And also within new developments, often at best concrete jungles, we have very, very limited open space, and that is a major concern. I mean, the outdoors provide a wealth of leisure opportunities for a healthy, active lifestyle, often available at no cost. I remember as a former lead member for leisure, we would look at investing in expensive leisure centres, and I'm very supportive of that. But actually, the outdoors is a wonderful opportunity for families, people of all ages, to go and be active without necessarily having to spend huge amounts of money. And that's what, for me, why it's called the great outdoors. And I have very many happy memories when I was growing up of charging around Arley and the Malvern Hills, doing orienteering, burning off huge amounts of the energy that myself and my classmates and my honourable member for Brigg and Gould were pleased to know that we often got lost, partly because we didn't have supervision, but it was good team building skills, and certainly my map reading skills benefited greatly from that. Now, to conclude, my plea, and I did touch on this on my earlier intervention, is about the cost of insurance for schools. Because if that proves to be a barrier, that limits the access. And one of the things I think the Department of Education could do is negotiate a national insurance contract to cover all schools. If you put all of the collective insurance renewals together, that's one hell of a piece of buying power and potential of economies of scale. And that, to me, would help benefit just this, sport, and all the other times where schools need to bust their children out elsewhere. So I think that's a constructive thing that the department could do to help in this. Thank you.
Evan Brennan.
Thank you very much, Mr Benton. And can I too congratulate the Honourable Member for Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire for securing today's debate, which somebody did point out has had a distinctly Welsh feel to it, because we've had contributions from the Honourable Member for Vale of Glamorgan, as well, the Honourable Member for Ceredigion, the Honourable Member for Aberconwy. I'm going to mention the other Honourable Members, but if I struggle pronouncing their English place names of their constituents, I hope if the Honourable Member for, is it Worcester? I think he contributed as well. And the Honourable Member for Brigg and Gould contributed, and of course at the end, the Honourable Member for, I think I can pronounce North Swindon, probably can manage that. But I think everybody's made a very good contribution to the debate. And in fact, at that latter point by the Honourable Gentleman for North Swindon, I thought of that when I was a Minister. I think that's an excellent proposition. I hope the Minister is able to respond positively. Have I left anybody out? I'm not sure. I think I've mentioned everybody who did make a contribution to this very enjoyable debate. And I think the tone of the debate today has reflected the fact there's a degree of consensus. I think right across the House there has been for many years on this subject about the importance of learning outside of the classroom. And honourable members have mentioned the many reasons why this is a good thing, whether it's the health benefits that come from children being able to learn outside the classroom, whether it's broadening their horizons simply in some cases for children, whether it's the practical skills that they can gain through this kind of approach, whether it's the influence on behaviour or indeed proving relationships between pupils themselves or between teachers and pupils, adults and children. And during my time as a minister in the Honourable Ladies Department, I was very keen to promote this. And the way I put it at the time, Mr. Benton, was that, you know, for whatever reason, we've managed to raise a generation of battery farm children, and it's time to allow them to go free range. And that's what we all are about, I think, in this debate this morning. We do need to liberate children from the bounds of the classroom sometimes and get them out into the great outdoors and enjoying all the benefits that will come from that. So I'm a big enthusiast, and that's why I congratulate the Honourable Gentleman for securing this debate today. And like other honourable members here, I also spent some time as a teacher and organised field trips. I remember one particular field trip to Llanbradach up in the Welsh Valleys, where I confiscated an awful lot of cigarettes off the pupils, but we had a wonderful time out there in the great outdoors, and also, you know, on various other trips as a pupil myself, as a young person, and often honourable members here have fond memories, and often from an education, the thing you remember. I always used to say as a teacher, if you can make something memorable to students, what will they remember about their education in years to come? And the things we often remember are those kinds of experiences outside the classroom, which have a very positive influence. And I think the issue about risk, which has been raised this morning several times, is a very important one, because we've got to get people focusing on the real risks, because there are risks. The Honourable Gentleman for Ceredigion pointed that out, and there can be irresponsible actions by people supervising learning outside the classroom, but it's the real risks rather than the rare risks that we should be focusing on in this debate. And it's absolutely essential that we get that message across to teachers, to governors, to pupils, to everybody involved in organising learning outside of the classroom. Now, the foundation phase in Wales has been mentioned by several honourable members here today, and this is the Key Stage 1 curriculum in Wales. And I attended Kitchener Road Primary School in my own constituency last year, and anybody who knows anything about Cardiff will know that you couldn't get a more urban school than Kitchener Road, a classic Victorian primary school on a very constrained site, right next door to a main road, very multi-ethnic school. And they managed to find a little bit of, you could only describe it as bushes really, and scrubland on the school site as part of the foundation phase, and held their forest school there. And for a moment, when you went in there and saw those children gathered around the campfire, you know, cooking toast, making toast on the end of a piece of stick, you know, in front of a fire, gathered around, you wouldn't know that you were 5 yards away from the main road, which they actually were. It was an absolutely classic example of what you can do with a bit of imagination. Doesn't need a great deal of resources. Yes, they needed the outdoor gear. It was a bit of a damp day. That's no reason why they shouldn't be going outside. And it was absolutely wonderful to see the children benefiting from that kind of experience, an experience I'm sure that none of these particular children would ever have an opportunity to have if it wasn't for the fact that the curriculum was organised, as the Honourable Gentleman for Vale of Morgan pointed out, to make sure, Mr. Benton, that those very young children spent half of their time outside. So there is a great deal of consensus, I think, in the House today about what we need to do. I think there's a great deal of consensus, in fairness, and honourable members have mentioned this, that the last government did make a big effort in order to do this. And the honourable members will know, if they've done their research, that that is the case, that I was the minister who organised and launched the Out and About package in 2008 from the old Department of Children, Schools and Families, including the Quality Badge Scheme, to give, if you like, a quality assurance to some of those organisations that the Honourable Member for Aberconwy mentioned in his own constituency are great at offering opportunities for outdoor learning, so that schools can be assured that these are organisations that can meet the standards and meet all the requirements that they need if they're organising learning outside of the classroom. And of course the government itself, and I give credit to the Minister for this, the government itself, in its response to the Select Committee's report, which was published just before the general election in April earlier this year, said in its response, under the previous administration, significant progress was made in bringing together organisations with an interest in promoting learning outside the classroom. These organisations have worked together on guidance and support for schools and on the development of the Quality Badge Accreditation Scheme under the direction of a new Council for Learning Outside the Classroom. So recognition, Mr. Benton, of the efforts that have been made so far in order to try and overcome this culture that a lot of honourable members have spoken about, which was getting in the way of learning outside of the classroom. However, I was a little bit surprised in preparing for today's debate to read the briefing from the Countryside Alliance, who the honourable gentleman who's called this debate used to be in charge of, because I met them the other day and we had a very good meeting discussing this, and I commend the trust that the honourable gentleman set up and their aims and what they're attempting to do. But their briefing actually said the previous government confirmed in its response, which was published at the end of October, that it does not believe outdoor education can contribute to the development of a child. Now, I think there's a typo in there, because it wasn't the previous government that issued the response to the Select Committee's report, Mr. Benton. It was this government that the Countryside Alliance is saying does not believe outdoor education can contribute to the development of a child. Now, I don't believe that that's true, Mr. Benton. It's the Countryside Alliance I'm quoting. It's not me saying this. It's from their briefing for this debate, which I'm sure the minister's read. And I'm very sorry. I'm sure that isn't the case, and the minister's going to confirm that in a moment. But I can understand why they might be concerned. That's all I'm saying, because I've read the responses of the government to the Select Committee's report. And it doesn't actually make very good reading if you're a member of the Education Select Committee, because it's tantamount to a wholesale rejection of the Select Committee's report on outdoor education, I'm afraid, Mr. Benton, because running through the response is this ideology of laissez-faire that seems to have overtaken the minister's department, of thinking if you just let everything go, don't drive anything at all, and let schools, governors, everybody get on with it, that will suddenly end up miraculously, as the Honourable Member for Vale Glamorgan also believes, miraculously 50% of time will be spent by children outside of the classroom by this process of general feeling good about things and osmosis and a laissez-faire approach. But that's not going to happen. You do need, Mr. Benton, to give clear guidance from the centre, as the Honourable Gentleman for Ceredigion pointed out. It's important. Teachers take notice of it. Governors take notice of it. Local authorities take notice of it. Providers take notice of it. You must give a clear indication of what you'd like to see schools doing, and sometimes you have to put a bit of resource into it, and sometimes you have to put a bit of stick into it as well, if you're a minister and you want to get things done, to make sure that it actually happens out there on the ground. Because if you just wish it, it's not going to happen, I'm afraid. And I'm not going to go through every one of the responses of the government to the Select Committee report, but basically, Mr. Benton, if you did have an opportunity to look at it, you'd find that most of them start with, we do not agree with the suggestion, for example, that an entitlement to one school visit a term should be built into the national curriculum. We think, here's another one, we think this is unnecessary and is an issue which should be left to the professional judgment of teachers. That's fine, Mr. Benton. It's all, good words, and I'm sure everybody will welcome it. But what will actually happen at the end of the day on the ground is what the government will be judged on, whether or not there is an increase in the amount of time that children are spending on learning outside of the classroom. Another example, we're not pursuing plans for a school report card, which was what was the recommendation of the Select Committee, that it should be part of the school report card. But we are looking at the performance tables with a view to providing parents with a wider range of performance information that's currently available. And I hope learning outside the classroom will be part of that. We do not agree that schools should have to provide such information to the department at a time when schools are asking us to reduce bureaucratic and data collection burdens. Well, they should reduce bureaucratic and data collection burdens at all times. But this is important, Mr. Benton, and it sends a signal to schools as to what you think is important, as to whether or not you do collect data. And just to close, Mr. Benton, I'm afraid that the idea that's been put forward by the RSPB before this debate, that the pupil premium can provide some funding for this, is cloud cuckoo land, because the pupil premium, I'm afraid, is a con. It doesn't add any additional money whatsoever in real terms to the school budget. And it'll be exposed when head teachers start. I can guarantee the Minister, because of the way that they've played funny figures with, with school funding, that she'll have head teachers queuing up to tell her that the pupil premiums are gone very shortly. They're cutting school sport, and we're still waiting the announcement. I hope the Prime Minister hasn't sold the country a dummy on school sports, because we're still waiting the announcement as to whether they're going to do anything to reinstate that structure, if we're talking about children's health. The School Food Trust is being abolished, and we're going to see school food standards fall as a result of it. We'll be back to turkey Twizzlers, no proper PE, and a lottery for learning outside the classroom. So I hope the Minister can, in answering the debate today, I hope the Minister can tell us what she's going to do to promote learning outside the classroom and face down that laissez-faire ideology that's infected her department.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. It's a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I was going to say it's a great pleasure to be in the debate until the last end point of the opposition's speech, which began so well and ended with such nonsense. But I guess the opposition have to be the opposition and demonstrate that they oppose everything. Can I begin by congratulating the Honourable Member for Carmarthen West and Pembrokeshire South for securing this debate on a really important topic. And it's so good to see the chamber so full of people. I'm aware of his role previously as Chief Exec of the Countryside Alliance and of his involvement in charitable work there and promoting outdoor learning. And it's really good to see that he's continued with that work now as a member of this House. And I do think it was a very good and very well-informed debate from contributions from the Honourable Gentleman from the Vale of Glamorgan about particular detail in Wales, from teachers, my honourable friend, the member for Ceredigion, as well as for the honourable member from Brigg and Goole. We've heard about a number of particular examples from people's constituencies. The honourable member for Worcester spoke about forest schools, and I was very interested to hear particularly about from the honourable members for Aberconwy and for North Swindon about the particular examples that they gave. And the government absolutely believes that outdoor learning is vital and has so many opportunities for young people to expand their horizons, to put learning into context so that you can actually see what's happening, not just to learn the theory, but also the opportunities to break down barriers. It's very easy to fulfill a role if you go into the same place and perform the same function every day. When you take a group of people out of that place and put them somewhere else, it breaks down the old traditional roles, which of course is exactly what has the impact it does on behaviour. And it's suddenly able to boost the confidence of many children who may not succeed in other areas in the classroom. Now, many honourable members began by declaring an interest, and I think I should probably declare an interest, that my brother works for the Outward Bound Trust as a fundraiser. And I was fascinated listening to him about the history of Outward Bound, and it's perhaps worth saying something about this because it's really relevant to the debate, that Outward Bound began as part of the war effort in 1941. It celebrates its 70th year next year. And it began because of the experience of watching merchant seamen who, when they were being torpedoed, some survived longer than others. And it was really obvious that the ones who were particularly not surviving were the young people. And so they took a lot of the young seamen out and did survival skills and team-building exercises, and found this had a real impact on their ability to cope under these strenuous experiences. And after the war, the experience of that on those particular seamen was so great that the organisation decided to try and roll that out to many other young people. And last year we were able to provide 26,000 young people with opportunities. And for much of that it was funded through charitable donations. So that's a prime example of many of the organisations that honourable members were speaking about just a minute ago, whether it be forest schools or FACE, I think one honourable member was speaking about. So organisations often with a very strong charitable arm who are able to take young people who can't otherwise afford those experiences and really change their perspective on life. And I'd like to pay tribute for all of the organisations, whether they're private or charitable, that do this kind of work for young people. I think it's important to say, however, that the government views outdoor learning as much wider than just this kind of adventure activity. It's not just about getting out into the countryside, though that's absolutely vital. Much of the contribution today has been about the experience that's necessary for the countryside. A couple of honourable members spoke about the fact that many of our young people don't know how food is produced, for example. All of those things are part of outdoor learning, but it isn't the only aspect. Getting out and doing experiencing music or theatre or the visual arts is also part of outdoor learning. It's a vital part of understanding history. For example, field trips in science and geography are all important. And not all of these trips have to be a long way away. In fact, the Honourable Member for Cardiff West spoke about an example in a school in his constituency, which was very close. And in fact, sometimes these activities just outside the door, even occasionally within the school gates, getting out of the classroom is what's so vital. Now, the Honourable Member for Cardiff West spoke about the previous government's record, and I do absolutely acknowledge that the previous government invested an awful lot of effort and time and money in trying to improve this situation. However, as the Select Committee very clearly stated, we are not there yet, and we are a long way away from being where we need to be. Far too few young people have the opportunity. And there are all sorts of reasons for that were drawn out in the Select Committee report, and I just want to refer to a few of those. Part of the problem, I think, is around an overcrowded curriculum, which my honourable friend, the member for Ceredigion, spoke about. There are so many compulsory elements, it makes it difficult to find the space in the day for teachers to be able to explore outdoor activity. But a number of honourable members were trying to request extra things to go into the curriculum, particularly in relation to this. Now, in the same way as the honourable member for Brigg and Gould said, one thing out, one thing in, I'm resisting the tendency to put extra things into the curriculum. However, perhaps a word of comfort to honourable members who are raising this issue. The National Curriculum Review is looking at particularly what should go into the curriculum for subjects like science and geography. It may well be that they will look at the particular component of outdoor learning there. Now, I don't want to preempt the review, but I would say that review is ongoing. I've only got 3 minutes, and I've got quite a lot to say, so I probably had better not just now. I'm also grateful for the Honourable Member for Carmarthen raising issues around health and safety, and I absolutely agree with him, and it was helpful for him to put on record those statistics about how rare these difficult circumstances are. And you know, the government takes very seriously the report by Lord Young, and I think it's absolutely vital that we get out the message that these events are very rare and that we should take a much more common sense approach. Now, the government believes that by offering more flexible funding to schools with fewer ring fencing, we have a much better chance of encouraging schools to take up opportunities in relation to outdoor learning. They are free to spend pupil premium, for example, on supporting particular activities for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. If the priority is to hire a minibus, then that may be what they choose to do. However, I will undertake the particular example that the Honourable Member for North Swindon gave about an insurance scheme bought on block to undertake to see whether or not there's anything that can be done with respect to that. The White Paper also spoke specifically about access to live theatre, encouraging the appreciation of plastic and visual arts, and working with museums and libraries to support their educational mission. This is something that the government really does take very seriously. And I mentioned the aspect of history and understanding of citizenship, which is precisely the reason why we support the Holocaust Education Trust in their programme Learning from Lessons from Auschwitz. Now, I certainly experienced this myself, and it's a fantastic programme that has the opportunity to really change perspectives. For those who haven't had this experience at school, it's the reason why the government is providing extra opportunities through the National Citizen Service, which will give young people at the start of that programme an opportunity to experience outdoor activity firsthand and really change their lives. Now, there are a number of questions that the Honourable Member for Carmarthen raised. With respect to teacher training, there will be a paper released on teacher training next year, and I'll ensure that his comments around teacher training are drawn to the schools minister's attention. With respect to the foundation stage, I'll ensure that the comments that have been raised here are fed into Dame Claire Tickell's review of the EYFS. The Rarely cover guide. If schools plan in advance, this shouldn't really be an issue. However, the department is looking at the issue of the rarely cover guidance. With respect to an entitlement for one particular activity of outdoor learning, I think this is much more about understanding outdoor learning as a whole part of a child's learning experience. And just having one trip doesn't really meet the needs. What you actually need to do is to mainstream this into the whole way in which you're looking at the curriculum, which is why I gave the point earlier about geography and about science.
Order.